right, so I'm going to go through the typical agenda that discussants, or at least academic discussants, follow. And that is to talk about the research question, a little bit about the motivation, the context for the study, some comments on that, the role of the internal auditors in green IT, a little bit of the related literature, and as a good discussant, I did go out and try to find some studies that were in this arena, and actually found a couple that were not cited, which I thought really shed some interesting light on this topic, so we'll get to that. A few complaints about the research method, because after all, I'm an academic, and we have to find something to complain about on the research method, right? The results, contributions, and then finally get to, I think, what might be more useful, especially for this setting. Where do we go from here? Some unanswered questions. So I think Kyung-hee did a good job of outlining the primary research question. Do the attitudes and activities of Australian internal auditors regarding green IT differ from those of Canadian and US internal auditors? Given that, Gray and Miller, by the way, Miller dropped off this study, but anyway, so they've already found that the prior study published in 2014, looking at this very same question for internal auditors in the US and Canada, found nothing. No significant involvement, right? And then we say, well, let's now move to, or extend the study to Australia. So as I tell my PhD students, where's the tension, right? So what in research, what we're trying to accomplish is what we call consequential belief revision, right? So we really need to set up why we might expect different results. They do I would say, somewhat decent job of trying to build that tension. They talk about lower SOX pressures in Australia compared to especially the US. And then Kyung-hee did spent some time talking about, well, it is mandatory in Australia, unlike the US and Canada. So that might be another reason to expect differences. And then also, they make this claim, but really don't support it with much evidence, that there is generally greater environmental awareness in Australia. That may be true, but I was looking for some evidence of that. For example, recycling programs. Is there higher participation in the general Australian population in recycling efforts compared to the US? Some evidence on that I think might improve kind of buy-in for why we expect differences in Australia. And they do spend some time in the early part of the paper, the revised part of the paper, by the way, I thought was improved relative to the earlier version, on the fact that sustainability reporting is widespread. That's decent motivation for the study. There's some mention of greenwashing, which is this notion of, I guess, falsifying these sustainability reports. But I was looking for more on how prevalent is it, and most importantly, what are the consequences? What are, if any, the negative consequences of this greenwashing? Okay? And it kind of gets to, what's the demand for assurance? Sustainability and green IT reporting. What are the penalties? What are the penalties in Australia, if any, for falsifying, for issuing falsified sustainability reports? So you have some, but I was looking for a little more on why we might expect differences moving to the Australian context. Now, this is the one that I struggled with the most. There's sort of a maintained assumption in the paper that internal auditors have the necessary expertise to be involved in green IT. And I sort of question that assumption. And especially when Gray et al., Glenn himself, in a prior study, found that very minimal internal auditor involvement in system development activities. So in IT, systems development activity is very minimal internal auditor involvement. So now we're moving to green IT and hoping for a different outcome. So that's, again, that's the part that I really struggled with. Why do we really expect internal auditors to be more involved with green IT when they weren't particularly involved in IT development? So this is where I think, and in fact, if I might preview Henry coming up after, he actually might have some thoughts on this. How do traditional internal auditor knowledge and skill sets that are used in traditional financial and operational auditing, how do those map to, how do those translate to the green IT domain? Not much of that in the current version of the paper. That's something I would recommend trying to really dig into. In particular, these, for these 4 steps, exactly how might the internal auditor contribute? What is it in the internal auditor's background and training in financial and operational, well, particularly the operational auditing, that might help with each of these 4 steps? Designing, developing specifications for green IT activities, designing, developing controls to ensure compliance with green IT. Number 3 and number 4, I think we can probably agree that, yes, they're on safer ground, right? Because once you've got those, it's easier to monitor controls and to provide assurance that green IT monitoring controls are being used, because that's kind of the more traditional, what internal auditors typically do. But the first 2, you would need some real knowledge, especially for number 2, to design and develop controls to ensure compliance with green IT specifications. Okay, so the digging that I did, here's an article by Higgins et al. In the Journal of Business Ethics that was looking at sustainability reporting in Australia. One of the conclusions that the authors drew was it was quote-unquote very expensive. Now, I don't know if that's really that expensive, because in the range was 20,000 to 60,000 Australian dollars. They called it very expensive. And I guess one could think that it is pretty expensive for just 1 or 2 sustainability reports to spend that kind of money. Well, but here's the interesting thing. Those that did not obtain external verification, why not? Why did you not? Unnecessary, 32%. Too expensive, 21%. Internal processes were sufficient, 18%. So those internal processes, presumably internal auditors, presumably, don't know. But unnecessary, too expensive for external verification. Another paper by Moroney et al., 2012, in the Journal Accounting and Finance. The quality of voluntary environmental disclosures was deemed higher when assurance was provided. Aha, good news. Bad news. There was no difference in assurance quality between accountants and consultants. So this kind of goes back to, I know that we've already had some discussion of web trust and why that didn't take off. Is it marketing? Is it, so many different reasons. But I would offer what I think is a reasonable hypothesis, that the market just didn't feel that accountants were the right folks to be providing assurance on web security and all the factors that web trust was getting into. So same here. Consultants work just as well as accountants. Okay, complaints about the research method. So if you simply look at the tables, you'll see 422 respondents. But there are only 43, I think, from Australia. So it's 43 new data points. The rest of those data points were from the original study, correct? So I think I guess it's, I'm not saying that it's not disclosed, but it's just, you have to take that in mind, that most of the data is all from a previous paper. There's only 43 new. So you get to the response rate, it's reported as 3.1% overall. But when you simply look at Australia itself, it's only 1%. Because there's about 4,000 members of the IIA in Australia, and we're getting 1%. Okay, so that's one-third. One-third of the already low response rate, right, overall response rate. So that's a bit of a concern. And there's some discussion in the paper of the typical tests that we would do comparing early to late respondents, but I think I was just looking for a little more on that. That is, did you look at every single dependent measure? Did you do a median split on early late? How exactly did you do that non-response bias test? One thing you could also do is to compare the demographics of those that responded to the population. And you should be able to get the population demographics from the IIA. So that might be a way to give some comfort on, are these respondents reasonably representative? There's discussion in the paper of when you had multiple respondents from the same institution, you eliminated the multiple respondents, but I wasn't sure what method was used. Did you drop every one except the first, or did you keep the last or the first? And also, of course, it may not make much difference. You only had 43, but it may be worth looking at if you, use different, dropped different participants. Does it change the results? Also, there's mention of some questions from the original Gray et al. Study were deleted, and not enough information on the process that was used to delete the questions from the earlier survey. And also, what did that do to the comparability, the ability to collapse the data across both? May be useful to scale the results by IIA membership size in each country. And then going back to how representative is this, you might, how does the breakdown of SIC codes in your sample compare to the population of all firms, again, by country? This third bullet point had me a bit worried. 41% of respondents reported that they did not have a primary background in accounting. 41% did not have a primary background in accounting. So we have a whole bunch of internal auditors without accounting degrees, I take that to mean. Okay? So what's that? Is what?
Why is that a problem?
Well, okay, but I think at least I would view a fundamental accounting background as being beneficial to understanding business processes, to understanding controls, to understanding all of. That's debatable. That's debatable. Okay. Okay, thank you. But.
Your internal audit function is looking at all your operations across the organization, right? So it's not just accounting.
True. Fair point. Fair point. If you.
Compliance risks, so you need people, IT auditors, right? They might have actually not.
And that's a fair point. I mean, especially when you're looking at operational auditing, you're fairly far removed from the financial accounting and financial statement. So. Agree with that. Yep.
I don't see why you would do that.
Well, at least for internal auditing in general, I think it's a concern. Okay. Let's not take too much time, right? We have one more person coming and then drinks. There's a total N column in your tables, and you've got a problem with that because you simply put 422 all the way down, regardless of the panels. When you go down to the different countries, it's not 422 in all the panels. Most important, green IT driver in Australia. You conclude in the paper that it's the socially responsible thing to do, but actually in your presentation, as Kyung-hee pointed out, the mean for the socially responsible thing to do or reducing operational costs was exactly the same. It was exactly the same mean for both of them. So might want to change the conclusion of the paper. So it is worth documenting that internal auditors in Australia are not involved to a significantly greater extent. However, I'd say that the caveat is it's subject to building a little more tension for why we would expect different results. Highlight some of the potential impediments to greater internal auditor involvement. And there is reason to believe that this area is going to grow in the future. Okay, unanswered questions and future directions. These 3 questions are already in the paper as suggestions for future research. I think this is where we need to go. Before looking to extend the study to a different country, we need to answer these basic questions. Are internal auditors not proactively pushing on management to have a broader impact? Or is it, the third point, which is that should be management, or is it management not pulling on internal auditors to have a broader impact? And the second one, if they are not pushing, what's the reason? Is it due to lack of skills, perceived or real? Is it confidence or time, budgets? Right, we're already pretty stretched.
Okay.
So one question I had was, like the reporting that we got in the surveys based on the results from the US, 499 companies produce sustainable reports annually or submitted some. How many of them actually in the sustainable reports actually mention having green IT programs? Because there's a difference between environment responsibility, and a lot of companies do a lot of things, but I don't think too many people really focus on specifically green IT. So if green IT isn't something that's important for a company to focus their resources and efforts on, then from an internal audit perspective, other than if it's driven by regulation, if it's not, the companies don't see it as an objective or a priority for them to invest in, then from an internal audit environment, it'll be very difficult for an internal audit function to push something or even dedicate resources to focus on something that's not important for the company.
Sure, I mean, so that's really another factor, which is this is not something that's a high priority for the company, especially in the US and Canada, right?
I see it as I don't think too many companies are focusing on green IT.
Sure.
That is the issue. It's not driving it from an internal audit group, but more from companies' perspective.
Sure, and also just to finish up, leave the authors to answer those questions. What's the demand for assurance on green IT sustainability reporting? Regardless of the source, regardless of who's providing that assurance, is there demand for this, right, for assurance on green IT or environmental or sustainability reporting? And then going forward, it will be important to theorize why cultural or governmental differences should influence green reporting practices, demand for assurance thereof, and provision of assurance in that domain by internal or external auditors. Thank you.